You can hear me okay?
Yes.
And I can hear you, so we're good with that. There's our audio check right there. Welcome, everyone, to the May 2025 edition of The Impact, a sustainable CT podcast. For your edification, your enlightenment, and your entertainment, too. I'm Jim Hunt, Communications Director at Sustainable CT, so if you're looking for someone to blame for this podcast, well, you can blame me. But remember, this is never a one-way conversation. We always want to hear from you for our edification and enlightenment. Drop us a note, won't you, to info@sustainablect.org. The Impact is brought to you in part by the Community Foundation of Eastern Connecticut. That's right. The Community Foundation of Eastern Connecticut brings people together to work towards a healthy, thriving, and sustainable Eastern Connecticut, and we are oh so glad they do. Visit them at cfect.org. Remember, Sustainable CT is independently funded. We don't have a magical rainbow unicorn money tree, no sir, but you can be a Sustainable CT sponsor. Find out how at sustainablect.org. I'm delighted to have Mallory Howard with me today. Mallory is an Assistant Curator at the fabulous Mark Twain House Museum in lovely Hartford, Connecticut. And I am very excited to talk to her for several reasons, not least of which is the fact that Sustainable CT will be having its annual Spring into Summer celebration next month, June 4th, at the fabulous Mark Twain House and Museum in lovely Hartford. So this is our opportunity to get to know all about the place, yeah? And if you haven't been there before, trust me, it is fabulous. And you really should take the time to go. If you're a fan of Sam Clemens, of course, also because it is an excellent example of historical renovation and preservation, a showcase of the upper middle class Gilded Age aesthetic, a phrase Twain and a co-author Charles Warner coined in 1873, by the way, a fascinating window into the cultural, social, financial, and intellectual mecca that was the city of Hartford back in the day before the turn of the century. Truly remarkable. Mallory Howard has been with the Twain House for more than 17 years, starting out there as a curatorial assistant. I had to get my head around that. Curatorial assistant. Way back in 2010. She probably knows more about Sam Clemens' time in Hartford than any one person should legally be allowed to know. Mallory attended Western Connecticut State. Go Wolves! It used to be Chuck the Colonial, I think, but they gave that up a few years ago. And she received her bachelor's degree from Central Connecticut State, home of those Blue Devils. Kind of like Duke, only much better, we like to say, right?
That's right.
All right. Mallory, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. Let me ask you, do you think you have the coolest job ever?
Yes.
Or you just got used to it now and it's, it's just a job?
No,
it's never just a job?
The coolest job ever. One of them, for sure.
How did you first get connected to the Twain House back in 2010?
I actually started a couple of years before that.
Oh, okay.
In the gift shop.
Oh, really? Working
Yes.
your way up from the gift shop. I love that.
Yes, I was in college looking for, a very part-time job while I took classes and happened to be hiring in the gift shop. So I thought I would love to work at a historic house in a museum. And so once I got here, I wondered about becoming a historic interpreter and giving tours of the house. So I looked into that. And then shortly after that, I was hired to do that. And then I kind of fell in love with the place and have been here ever since.
Yeah, I could see how you would fall in love with that place. I've been there, I don't know how many times. And every time I go, I see something new. I feel it all over again. It never gets old. And it's such a beautiful venue. It really is. But historic and folkloric and all the stuff, but it's also just a very nice, has great vibe to it when you walk in. And I have to say, this is personal to me because as a writer for the last 40 or 50 years, I've been influenced by many literary figures, both famous and obscure, but none really comes close to the impact Twain has had on my way of looking at the written word. I only aspire to it, of course. But even as a very young writer, I was captivated by his wit and his humanity and his descriptive sense. And of course, the storytelling. I mean, my God, the storytelling, right? I'm hardly alone in this, I know, but being an admirer of Twain is one club that I'm happy to be a member of. So the fact that we're having our little gala at his Hartford home is pretty special to me. So I just wanted to get that out. This is personal, folks. This is personal. Do you see a connection between historical preservation generally and the broader concept of sustainability? Because we certainly do. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think historic preservation is inherently, a sustainable practice.
Yeah.
And
I mean, logically, right? I mean, just on its face, it is, but it goes deeper, I'm sure, for you folks too. So, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's something that we take very seriously, that we work towards all of the time here. It's something that we think about often. And it's really important for several different reasons, just environmentally, financially, really being part of the community and keeping the legacy of Twain, the house, for future generations. So there's lots of different avenues when it comes to the museum and the house, and how sustainable it is. It can go in a variety of different directions. Right. And as I said, we think about that quite often when we're sort of branching out in those areas.
Yeah. I mean, again, just kind of logically on its face, you say, well, preserving the old stuff means you're not building new stuff. It's kind of just that obvious thing. But it really does more than that, too. It brings the community together. It gives people a stake in their history, their own culture, in a way that, because we consider sustainability, quote unquote, to be something writ very large. And it has a lot to do with the community being engaged. And just wanted to jump thinking about that. I wanted to jump to ask you how the modern Mark Twain House and Museum engages with the Hartford community today. Is there any special things that you do to really, bring the community in at this point?
Yeah, one of the most recent things we've done is an exhibit actually called It Happened in Hartford, and it takes place both at the Twain House and in downtown Hartford. So while you're walking down there, you'll see signage that has explanations of what that area looked like during Twain's time, some of the industry that took place. And so it's a way for us to sort of connect with the city of Hartford itself and educate both the citizens of Hartford and those that are visiting from outside of Hartford about what its history was like, what it looked like. It's very different, obviously, from what it was today. And so that's a big way that we've recently really tried to connect with the community here. But we do all sorts of things. We welcome a lot of Hartford schools to take tours of the museum and do a lot of work with that. We're always looking for new ways to partner with other Hartford institutions, like the Harriet Beecher Stowe Center, for example. So we try to find a lot of different ways to connect with the community here.
Yeah, I mean, you meant the neighborhood, as it were, back in the day, Harriet Beecher Stowe, and I mean, all of that intellectual group of people in that area, that little community, was pretty astonishing. And of course, it doesn't quite look like that today, but yet to have that historical reference is really nice. Does the museum itself engage in sustainable practices? Like, you must, just normal common stuff. You're trying to save energy along the way too, right? It's an old house. It's an old house, so to keep it heated and lit and everything else is not a small endeavor. So,
yes, not only the historic house, but also the museum center. I mean, that ends up being a big draw on resources. So we try to look into different things when we can. We looked into solar panels for a while. But that kind of got put on the back burner because I think it's a little complicated for us. But digitization is big, especially in my department in curatorial, as far as trying to be more environmentally friendly. Usually when you work in curatorial and you work for a historic structure, you have a lot of paper and excess and things like that. So really trying to cut down on those things. And we're also big into reusing. So anything that we can take and reuse, both for sustainability practices, the environment, but also financially as well, we try to do that. So once again, there's different ways as a museum that we try to look at sustainable practices in different ways. But it can be hard. So, we reevaluate and try to get together every once in a while and revisit old ideas or topics or things that we've seen that have come out in the news that might be helpful to us. So it's sort of always potentially evolving and changing in a discussion that we have pretty consistently.
Yeah, it's a challenge. I mean, we know, we know, we know it is. And I'm just thinking outside the box here. Well, you guys should get together with the people, our friends at Connecticut Green Bank. I know they have a lot of different programs, so to be able to bring solar to established to buildings, commercial and nonprofit, and also to help underwrite, things that will have long-term energy savings. You should talk to those if you haven't already. We'll hook you up. We'll hook you up with a Green Bank.
Great. That'd be great.
As much as has been written about Mark Twain and by and about him, he always strikes me as something of an enigma anyway. Let's talk about him. Let's talk about Sam Clemens himself. He's a figure of seemingly boundless interests and certainly boundless opinions. He was something of a naturalist and a progressive, lover of the outdoors, the state of nature, and the absence of man, quite critical of man's impact on the natural environment. We'll put it another way. I remember, the way it struck me was, at least in his writing, he viewed man in his natural state or less cultured state to be preferable to the urban, moneyed, and politically powerful class. How do you think the Twain House, which in many ways is quite reflective of the Gilded Age? I mean, that aesthetic, you can't escape it. Yeah. Not a mansion. It's not like Newport or something, but it does have that feel. Nevertheless, it's reflected there. How do you think it also reflects his progressive philosophy in some way? Where is there a tension there? Are those things both represented in the house, you think?
Yeah, he's a very fascinating, multi-layered figure.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that is difficult with him is that he can be very complicated and hypocritical with things.
Yeah.
So as you can imagine, yes, very into nature. Most of the reading that he did, the books he loved the most were science and nature books. Yeah. He was not a big fiction reader. So he was very much into all of that. But he also loved money. He's always trying to create inventions to make more money. He loved showing the house off to people. So there's really sort of this dual element to him, which is interesting because you have the Samuel Clemens, Mark Twain, sort of alter ego, pen name, stage persona. And so that's what makes him really fascinating is that there's multi-layers to him, and something he said, in 1872, he completely flips on its head in 1891. So it's kind of always a mystery as to how he's going to react to things. I think at the museum, we try to really do that through our education programs and our just general community programs. So I think, any topic, I always joke to my coworkers, I can make any topic fit into Mark Twain. It does not matter what it is.
Right.
I will find a way to connect him to it. So that's something that I really enjoy doing because we can take controversial topics or things that people don't necessarily want to talk about and make it approachable and have a discussion here at the museum. And I think that's something that he would be very proud of, is having those sort of open discussions because that's what he did. I mean, you mentioned Nook Farm in the neighborhood. They tended to just walk into each other's houses. Yeah. And they would gather and have discussions and read papers that they had written on a variety of topics. So no topic seems to be off limits. So we try to reflect that in our literary programs, in our education programs, and really make it a place where people can come together and have, open, honest dialogue with each other.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, and I agree with you. He's a much more complex figure than would appear as the stage persona. But if there is one bedrock principle, I think, to him, a through line, I guess, of his life, would be that he loved that intellectual that exchange, that being able to explore different ideas and really have debate. And you're right, you can use him, and many people have, for almost any argument. Right.
Yeah.
It's one of those. Yeah. He comes to it in about lots of different ways, and entertainingly so, and not a pedantic, not in a dogmatic way, but in his Mark Twain manner. It's very entertaining, so that all of these things are very approachable.
One of the things is how relevant he is today too. I mean, things he said in the 1880s, 1890s.
Amazing, isn't it? Yeah.
Would seem like we're talking today. I remember when I saw Hal Holbrook perform for the first time. Yeah. He was doing one of Mark Twain's pieces that he had written, and it blew my mind of how it fit perfectly into today's culture and society and what was happening at that time. And so the fact that we can take Twain from that period and still apply his thoughts and his words to things that are happening today really shows that he had a sort of a perfect aim for humanity. Yeah. And I think that's one of his biggest things, is being able to sort of see humans for what they are and how fallible they are. And that makes him someone that we still talk about, and a lot of the issues that we still talk about, and we can use him as sort of a sounding board.
Yeah.
When I was putting together my first book, I did a stretch in Washington as a newspaper correspondent. And every day I went over to the Congress and reported on the inmates there. It is very entertaining. One of them got a bill passed to construct a dam where there wasn't any water. But they didn't find out about it until they built the dam. So they had an investigation to see if they could build a river to save the dam. God made idiots first. That was for practice. Then he made Congress.
It doesn't hurt that we're in what some might say is the second Gilded Age. Yes. So there are a lot of parallels and connections there as well. Now, Hartford was quite the hub at the time, intellectually, financially, culturally, in Twain's day. Tell us how, Sam Clemens, renowned and celebrated vagabond, a chronicler of the rural class and working class, fit into that polished milieu. I mean, you had mentioned they'd walk into each other's houses and whatnot. From what I read, it seemed as though he took some delight in stirring the establishment pot a little bit and challenging what might be considered the proper Hartford gentleman at the time. Even though at the time as well, he was quite welcome, even sought after in these circles, right? I mean, it wasn't as if he was a gadfly or somebody that they didn't want to have around. He was sought out, so how did he fit into that? Even though he really wasn't one of them, but then he was at the same time.
That really is due to his wife,
okay.
Livy.
Oh, really?
He called her Gravity because she helped him to stay grounded. But she comes from a very, very different background from him. He grew up in the backwoods of Missouri. His family owned enslaved people, and he had a very different upbringing than her. She's from Elmira, upstate New York. She came from an abolitionist family, very wealthy, and so their backgrounds really couldn't be any different. And so she helps him in numerous ways, both with evolving his thinking on things like race, but also is kind of that springboard into society, because she was raised a certain way. She can kind of take those edges off of him. And so she really softens him in a way, and I think opens the door for him to really be a part of that society that normally he would probably have a harder time being involved with.
Yeah. Yeah. And they spent a lot of time in Elmira, right? I mean, that was almost your twin, I don't know what you would call it. You have a great relationship with the people over in Elmira who have done a lot of preservation work there as well. Is that true? Yeah.
Yes. The Clemens family would typically go to Elmira every summer because as he got more and more famous, he would get bothered all the time. He raised 3 daughters in the house, and so they're constantly running around. So Elmira was a chance for him really to connect with nature. He had his sister-in-law had an octagonal study built for him on the top of a hillside. And so he would just go up there and be able to get a lot of his writing done, thinking, had beautiful views. And so that was a time for him to really work and reflect. And so that ends up being a really important part of his life.
Yeah. Now, kind of just because I was wondering in your job, is your favorite part of the house, or is there some element about the house, the museum, that you really like the most, or is it all just?
I would say I'm a big fan of the library. That's my place. We actually do a program called Writing in the Library, where you can come and work on whatever writing project you have in the space. So it's just beautiful. You have the conservatory coming off of it, surrounded by books. I'm a huge reader, and so just being in there, knowing that Twain told stories in that room to his children and would kind of have to come up with them off the top of his head, I think is miraculous. So I can only imagine the tales that were sort of woven in that room over the years. So it's a very special place. I think it's stunning, but also very personal at the same time. Usually people's favorites are either the library or the billiard room. And of course, the billiard room is where, he does try to get some of his writing done when he can, where he plays billiards, hangs out with friends, really his special place. So those two rooms are usually the most popular. So it's probably a little cliche for me to pick the library, but just being honest, that room is really the one I love the most.
Well, no, because I'm with you on that. I really love the library too. And it's what's strange about that room. What's endearing about that room is, even though it has that certain, opulence of the age, nonetheless, it feels lived in, right? It feels human. Even though, again, that kind of contradiction, a little opulent, but it felt really lived in. And the stories about, the fireplace and the mantel and the stories he would tell his kids and different stuff about the room really makes it feel comfortable, even though it has all those trappings of, I don't know if you would call it pretentiousness, but that age where everything had to be over the top a little bit. Everything was a little bit over the top, So
we say that all the time, that despite its elegance, how decorative it is, always wows people when they walk in. They're not expecting it. That it does have that cozy, lived in feeling to it, both on the first floor. And then obviously as you go up to the top two, those are really the family spaces. So they're not going to be as ornate. So that lends it to feel even more cozy. But you had referenced the Newport mansions. When you think of those, not as cozy. They're huge, they're elegant, but it doesn't feel as cozy as the Twain House. And that's something we really love too.
Sure. And one of the things I'm kind of odd this way, I suppose, when I go to historical places, especially residences, been to Newport many times looking at those places. And one of the things I find most fascinating are the back rooms, the kitchen, the even, where they have some of the industrial plant. How did they heat the place? Or, stories like that, because it is also just a part of, historical curiosity. And this house was built with cutting edge. I mean, at the time, it was like modern. It was considered modern, a lot of the conveniences of the house and how they did things. But that part of me, I'm always find fascinating when I go there too, to see that, even down to the plumbing and how did they do the, how did they live, literally live from day to day. I love that stuff.
Right. Yeah. We love talking about the staff that worked for the family.
Yeah.
We always end the tours by going into the kitchen and really talking about some of their lives and how they ran the households. I mean, there was, between 7 to 8 servants that would work for the family at any given time. And they were really what drove the house and made it run successfully. Olivia, his wife, would oversee all of that. But like you said, it's fascinating, the technology that's emerging at that time and just the responsibilities that the staff had in order to make that house tick.
Yeah. And not cheap as Twain had to support the salaries of people. Now, again, they weren't making lots of money, but to run a house of that size with a family of his size in Hartford at that time, you had to have 6, 7 servants doing various, work at a house like that. So, not a simple matter. So no. Let's take a break a second. We'll come right back. This is great. I'm having fun. So we'll come right back. We'll return to our program in just a moment. You've been listening to The Impact, a Sustainable CT podcast. Hey, if you're not yet a subscriber to Actions and Impact, the Sustainable CTU newsletter, you could be missing out on some very important information to you, to your organization, and to your town. Accept no substitutes. Do yourself a favor and subscribe today. And you can do that where? At sustainableCT.org, of course. And while you're out there tripping the web fantastic, don't forget to join us on Facebook for some fun and interesting stuff. Guaranteed safe for children and pets. Come on, be our friend, won't you? At facebook.com/sustainableCT. And yes, of course, we're LinkedIn. Search for Sustainable CT from your LinkedIn page, and you'll find us right there, being all LinkedIn and Media Social. And did I happen to mention that we'll be having our 2025 Spring into Summer celebration at the Mark Twain House and Museum on June 4th? Yes, indeed, 351 Farmington Avenue, Hartford, on Wednesday, June 4th from 4 to 7 p.m. Some of our favorite partners will be tabling. We'll honor our spring certified communities. We'll introduce our newest cohort of Sustainable CT Fellows. We'll have a panel discussion on how to create effective sustainability teams led by, you guessed it, some very effective sustainability teams. And tours of the Twain House will be available too, which is very cool. We'll have music and light fare, and all of your Sustainable CT friends will be there. To get the full value of joy, you must have somebody to divide it with, Twain said. We hope you will come divide it with us. Go to where else? sustainablect.org to register for this stellar event, and do it soon because space is limited. Yes, it is. Our 2025 Spring into Summer celebration is generously sponsored by Posigen, solar energy and energy efficiency. That's Posigen. And by Energia, by our friends at Clean Transportation Communities of Southern Connecticut, by Ørsted, Capital for Change, Noresco, and Casella Waste Systems. We're receiving support as well from Waste Zero, All American Waste, Connecticut Water, Liberty Bank, Blue Earth Compost, and Reworld Waste Solutions. Thank you, sponsors. Okay, let's get back to the program to learn more about this fascinating place. Welcome back. We are talking to Mallory Howard, who is an assistant curator at the Mark Twain House and Museum. We're having a great conversation, and I'm really looking forward to going there. It won't be my first time, but it'll be different, very special, because we're going to be having our Spring into Summer celebration there on June 4th. So I'm looking forward to that. Twain, like many of his contemporaries at the time, was steeped in spiritualism. I mean, this was a huge thing after the Civil War. It had been for quite some time, but it really kind of blossomed after the Civil War, and right on up to the 1900s. That's fascinating to me. Tell us about Twain's connection to spiritualism. It was connected in some curious ways too, with the abolition movement, to progressivism, to the women's movement, suffrage movement. These things were all kind of connected in some way. Is that right?
Yeah, I have to be careful here because spiritualism is one of my favorite topics.
Okay, well then I'm glad I asked.
I can go on and on for the rest of the time about it.
Go for it.
It's a fascinating topic. You mentioned kind of using it during certain movements. One of my favorites is during the women's suffrage movement, and they would hold seances and connect to dead respected statesmen to try to convince the men in their lives that they should support women's suffrage.
Oh, I love that. We should try that today.
Is that great? So they connect to like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and they would say, you need to make sure you support your wife and women's suffrage and your daughters, and it's a cause that you need to be more involved in. And so some would leave and go, all right, I heard it from these men that I've admired in our nation's history, and I need to get more involved. And so that's something they use to their advantage. But Twain also was very interested in spiritualism. When he was a young reporter out in California, one of his jobs was to actually attend seances and debunk them. So he would go and prove whether they were frauds or not, and whether he could figure out their tricks. And then he suffered a lot of tragedy throughout his life. He lost his firstborn and only son, Langdon. His younger brother, Henry, died in a steamboat explosion. And then he lost two of his three daughters before himself. So Susie died at 24 of spinal meningitis. Jean died just a few months before him at age 29 on Christmas Eve morning. And his wife, Olivia, also predeceased him. So this is a man that has suffered a lot of tragedy. And I think there's a part of him that really wanted to believe that he could connect with the other side, which is why it was so prevalent and popular during the Civil War, because so many people lost their lives. You're talking 700,000, that this is a way to sort of soothe people, thinking that they could connect with a loved one they didn't get to say goodbye to. And Sam Twain really is like that as well. He does attend seances when he's older to try to connect to people like his brother and his daughter, Susie, but it's one of those things that he sort of flip-flops about throughout his entire life.
Yeah.
He gets really mad at times, thinking people are being taken advantage of by these mediums and by going to these seances, but he always leaves the door cracked for it, because I think deep down he wants to believe that this is true.
So you think he did come to this earnestly? I mean, I've read both sides of this as well, and a lot of what he's written about it. You're right. He was originally quite critical, going out to try to debunk this stuff and having some fun with it, frankly.
Yeah.
It was grist for the mill, for the writer's mill, in a lot of ways. But yeah, I could see he did have experienced a lot of tragedy in his life, and I could see how that might bring him around to the whole concept a little bit. Now, did his neighbors and peers, colleagues share this too? They did, right? This was not him alone having this, this concept, right?
No, the biggest one was Harriet Beecher Stowe's sister. Her name was Isabella Beecher Hooker. She was very big in the women's suffrage movement as well as in the spiritualism movement. She several times, we have letters where she's trying to convert Sam into becoming a spiritualist. And she's trying her hardest to get him to do that. And we know that they actually attended a party at her house on New Year's Eve one year, where she was told through mediums at the stroke of midnight she was going to become president, ruler of the world.
Whoa.
And so she decides to throw a party. She has a bunch of mediums over, and Sam and Olivia end up attending the party. And of course, midnight comes around and nothing happens. Yeah. But the neighborhood was involved, and therefore he was to a certain degree. And so, like I said, he still, attends her seance party on New Year's, even though he doesn't necessarily believe anything is going to happen.
Yeah.
So that's what makes the community of Nook Farm, which is the neighborhood that they lived in, so special, is because you had really fascinating people like Isabella Beecher Hooker, like Harriet Beecher Stowe, William Gillette, Charles Dudley Warner, living together in this sort of idyllic enclave of creatives, which I think was wonderful for him.
Now, how does the house, if it does, and I'm trying to think of my experience being there, but you will know much better than me, how does the house reflect some of this spiritualism? Does it feel haunted on occasion? Do you ever have that sense that maybe there's more to it than...
Well, we have been on several episodes of Ghost Hunters.
Okay, there you go.
So you can find that online. We also do graveyard shift ghost tours, which are very popular every year. But they're great. We talk a lot about the history of spiritualism, how it came about, the connection that the family had with it. But we also talk about some unusual, weird, spooky things that happen on tours or to staff when they're in the house alone. Yeah. But it does. It has a certain energy to it, no matter what. Yeah.
I mean, yes. I mean, definitely. That's a big rambling house. And you can feel like, oh, yeah, all right, I can see a ghost hanging out here for sure. Absolutely. I imagine that let's put it this way. So did he have any artifacts? Are there anything in the house that reflects the spiritualism that he was dabbling in at the time? Or is it, he didn't keep any keepsakes or something like that? No. Okay.
No, I mean, we have various artifacts that we like to show and talk about as far as Victorian mourning. So one of the things that they did was when their son died, they did a cast of his face that Olivia kept in a box under her bed. So we talk about that. Susie, when she's dying, we talk about how she has these delirious scribbles that she's making because of her sickness, and sort of she's seemingly connecting to the other side. So there's definitely things like that we talk about, but nothing specific that he really kept in that regard.
Okay, that's probably just as well. It would be kind of creepy or something. I don't know.
It would.
What is the favorite? What do you like most about your job? I mean, we talked about the library and being a favorite place. But, you've been doing this a long time. So what is it that you really enjoy the most about coming to work?
I would say every day is very different. Yeah. And so I like that element to it, that I come in and I really never know what my day is going to look like. And so that that is really wonderful. And as I said earlier, he's such a multi-layered, multifaceted person. I really can't picture, working for another figure, just because his life is so rich with everything you could possibly imagine. I mean, whether it's adventure, tragedy, humor, travel, anything you can point to, and
politics,
politics, satire. He's a part of all of that. And so I think that is something that I really love, is that coming in, and I don't know what topic I'm going to be working on that day. It could be someone writing in asking about how he felt about seances, or it could be someone else asking, why he became a mugwump politically. Or it's talking about how he rented cats in the summertime. So, it's just, you never know what's going to take place. And I think, too, that reflects, like I said earlier as well, in our programming, that we do a little bit of everything. We had a mentalist because he believed in telepathy and the mind power. Yeah. We have books of new authors coming out because we want to talk about his literature and humor. So it's just a place that's very alive, whether that's just discussing him and how he's relevant to today's issues, or whether that's having a program that brings the community in. I think there's just a myriad of ways that this place feels alive and connects with Hartford, but also the state, the country. Even the world. We have people from all over the world that come here to visit, all 50 states every year, numerous countries. And so it's kind of that common bond of Twain that brings them together. And I think they leave learning a lot more about his life and really being surprised about what his life entailed.
Yeah, everybody has this cartoonish kind of concept of what Mark Twain is. And that shouldn't sound so pejorative. There is that public persona, but again, we go back to what we were talking about before. There is so much more to the man and his family and the life he lived. Let me ask you, kind of connected to this idea of the job you have. You see, I see how jealous I am. I'd love to have this job, but I can see how every day pretty much would be something different, because you're getting, at least the public face of this, you're getting different people showing up every day, whether they're school kids or, you're having some organization come in and have an event like us, or, whoever it might be. Now, so you're always going to have some different dynamic happening in that. That's really very cool. Now, does the Twain House act as a resource for scholarship too? Do people come? Now, I've read some good, biographies about Twain. Did they ever show up? Do they go there kind of as a resource? Is that what happens too? Yeah. Yeah,
we get Twain scholars that will come here and do research. We also get local school children and teachers that are working on various projects. Our latest and greatest visiting scholar was actually Ron Chernow, who's coming out with a Mark Twain biography next week on May 13th.
Yeah, I heard about this. So he has
he's actually coming to do an event for us on June 10th. So his biography ends up being, I think, about 1,200 pages, which is a lot.
Yeah, that's
but he came here to do research for his book, and we're very excited for that. And I think, once again, it's a wonderful way to bring Twain even more to the masses and to the public, and get them to learn more about him, instead of just that, like you said, kind of caricature persona. And that really gets crafted, which is really interesting, by his middle daughter, the only one that survived him, Clara. Is she really kind of protected his image for a long time and wanted him to really be seen as sort of the grandfatherly, funny guy who wrote about Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. And really, a lot of his works end up being kept closed for a while. And so his darker works, like Mysterious Stranger, Letters from the Earth, those don't get released until later, years and years after he died. So. Okay.
That makes sense. Sure. I didn't realize that. Yeah. Okay. Well, how do you practically accommodate researchers? Do they come and sit in the library? What do they, do you have an academic facility of some sort that you're able to accommodate people who come and actually spend long hours going through papers or something like that? Is that how it works?
Yeah. We have a research library on site, which has every book Twain's written, practically every book written about Twain. So it's really a treasure trove of information. And so people will come here and spend days at a time sometimes, and just sort of plop down in the library and go through files and books. Sometimes we'll pull things from the archive for people to look at. He was notorious for writing in his books. So we talk about marginalia pretty often, and we'll pull things out if a scholar comes to work on things like that. So it is a really great resource for not only Mark Twain, of course, and his family, but also, Hartford history and Nook Farm history and things like that. So we do get people pretty often coming to do that.
I should have asked this earlier, but I'm curious, how did the House and Museum organization, how did this all come about? I mean, he had to leave that house. You'll know the year. I don't know exactly. And they lived in Europe. And they tried to hold on to it for a while, and then they finally sold it. Who did they sell it to? How did it end up in your hands? How did it not end up, into the wrecking ball at some point?
Yeah, it came very close to that.
I'm sure it did.
And we're different. Sometimes you'll go to house museums and they'll say, well, it just got passed down generation to generation. Right. Everything's original. That's not the case for us.
Right.
The Clemenses end up moving out of the house in 1891 because of some of his bad business and financial decisions. They did rent out the house to some friends and planned on moving back one day. But Susie ends up passing away in the house. She was visiting some neighbors and friends while the rest of her family was overseas. She was meant to join them and unfortunately got ill. They put her into the house thinking she'd be more comfortable, and she dies there. Oh. So after that, her parents decide it's too heartbreaking to move back into that house. And so they don't return. They end up selling the house in 1903 to Richard Bissell, who was the president of the Hartford Fire Insurance Company at the time. So the Bissell family moves in. So they live here for quite a while. And then eventually some entrepreneurs want to buy the property and demolish the house in order to build apartments. Sounds
familiar. Yeah. Yes. Okay.
And so thankfully that does not happen. And that's really due to Harriet Beecher Stowe's great niece named Catherine Seymour Day. She ends up saving the house from destruction. She takes out a mortgage on it. And so over the years, they end up having to rent the house out to pay for that. So at one point, it's a children's branch of the Hartford Public Library. Wow. It's where Kingswood Oxford started. The boys' half of that school started in the Mark Twain House.
Wow.
It was also a boarding house and apartment for people. So it goes through some really strange changes. And then really in the 50s and 60s, they start restoration work. And then 1974, it opens for the 100-year anniversary from when they first moved in. And 2024, we just celebrated 150 years since they moved into the house.
Wow. Wow. That is a storied past.
Yes.
One that I think probably Twain would appreciate in some odd way,
It fits him well. He's such a complicated person.
Yeah, being a rooming house, somehow that's somehow fitting along the way.
Exactly.
And Susie's ghost must be the one walking around if she died. If she died in that place, that's why they didn't come back. Yeah, that's what I she's one of them. Oh, Mallory, this has been fantastic. We are out of time, and it just zooms right by when you're having fun. So I really appreciate your time, and thank you so much. We'll look forward to catching up with you when we're there. I hope
you're going to be there. I'd love to meet you in person, and we can geek out together a little bit more.
Yeah, let's do that. Okay. Thank you, Mallory. Very much appreciate it.
Thank you.
We hope you've enjoyed today's edition of The Impact, a Sustainable CT podcast. As always, this program is recorded, produced, and copyrighted, by Sustainable CT. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for listening. Thank you to our sponsor, the Community Foundation of Eastern Connecticut. Thanks to our guest, Mallory Howard, for sharing her vast knowledge of Samuel Langhorne Clemens with us today. And thanks to everyone for taking local actions that have a statewide impact.